everybody, how's it going today? Glowplasma231 here, back in data about Kagurabachi, chapter number 75. This chapter is titled Illusion. And let me just say, I am so happy that this chapter was titled this, and I sort of read this before reading, like, the next few pages of this chapter, especially page 4, because, like, I was sitting down and I read this chapter. I mean, I'm currently recording this video like 10 minutes after the chapter initially released, because, like, hey, I love doing these Kagurabachi reviews right after the moment of release where I'm still, like, in the hype sphere of, like, oh my gosh, this is absolutely and totally crazy, right? But I got to this 4th page and I'm just like, oh, wait a second. No, that can't be right. That's just, like, fake news, right? I remember, like, oh, wait a second. Yes, the chapter title is called Illusion, so it all does make sense at a very certain point, but let me just say, Samura's introduction was honestly not quite what I really expected to be. Like, the whole crow wings that he sort of sprouted really just go away here in the first minute. But either way, it is really cool just to see Samura here and doing stuff here in the current story again. And also, this chapter is really awesome because we learn what Kumeyuri's, or what one of Kumeyuri's abilities is, which is honestly really cool. And then get some hints like, hey, while all this stuff is going on in Dakota Bloodshed Hotel, and while Samura is, like, tied up and all of that, what is happening with the leader of the Hishaku Yora and the Hat Shaku, whose name we still don't know, and it seems like he is, like, the second in command, or, like, the second most important Hishaku. I'm not going to say second most important because at this point, Hiruhiko is very important as far as members of the Hishaku go, but what I mean to say by that is, like, he seems like he is a very big deal of a character, all things considered, right? But with all that being said, I really just want to hop in this chapter of Kagurabachi because, like I said, there's just honestly so much really cool stuff to just sit down and talk about, so yeah. But of course, before we can go and talk about chapter number 75 of Kagurabachi, we first need to talk about what happened last time in chapter number 74. Now, in chapter number 74, we had this really awesome thing where we wrapped up the Samura flashback. We saw pretty much what happened whenever Yora came back to Samura's house and said, like, hey, you're going to join us for the sake of the future. Learn the entire reason why Yora wants to go through and actually wield the Magatsumi, the Shinichi blade, pretty much to counter the true realm at the current Sword Saint, pretty much getting rid of the malediction on that small island, as he always calls it, right? Honestly, my favorite part about Yora is how he just always calls it, like, hey, the small island country. Like, he never calls it Shokoku. It's like, hey, it's got to be this thing in specific, right? But either way, we pretty much saw that interaction. We saw whenever Iori first got her memories of her father sealed, and she was holding this little note that said, like, hey, I'm sorry for all of the pain I caused you. She's just, like, crying onto it. And of course, we then cut back to the present in the Kagurabachi universe where it's like, hey, here are all of the things currently happening. Iori just protected Ikora using, of course, her blade style. Chihiro just came through, saw the perfect example that Iori was using, went through and cut down Hiruhiko's blade. And of course, Todo came in and warped Hiruhiko away to another location and brought him to Kumeyuri. And Chihiro and Iori were talking a little bit, and the whole idea was like, hey, you want to see your father? Well, if I draw my enchanted blade, it'll let you see him, so I'm going to do that, right? Really, Chihiro drawing the blade for another. I really honestly wanted to title last video, like, Chihiro drawing the blade for another, but honestly, I just thought last episode's title of 3 swords, 3 goals, or whatever I called it, was a whole lot better. What even did I call last video? Now I'm going to go over to YouTube Studio so I can clarify if that's what I think it was 3 swords, 3 goals, or 3 goals, 3 swords. It was something like that. Let me go over to content. 3 blades, 3 goals. That sounds a whole lot cooler, right? But pretty much we saw all that various stuff happening. Of course, Chihiro drew Inten, Hiruhiko drew Kumeyuri, and then Samura appeared in the sky. The eternal night of the owl just disappears here in this moment. And hey, now it is time for an epic showdown as Samura appeared in the sky for these almost angelic wings, right? But that is where we start off this chapter of Kagurabachi with this really cool cover page where it's just like, hey, Samura, Tobimune, Chihiro, Inten, Hiruhiko, Kumeyuri. So we see all of them going through and just drawing the blades here in this moment. And of course, we see that Samura descends from the sky and lands down onto one of the, like, girders, of course, being that they're currently building part of the Kyoto Bloodshed Hotel, and he just says, crow. And of course, he looks down to both where Chihiro and Iori are sitting here in this moment, or I guess where they are more accurately standing, right? And Chihiro just thinks back to the whole thing of like, hey, if an enchanted blade is unleashed anywhere, he can detect it. Think of it as unusable, right? And we also see where Todo is with Hiruhiko sitting on top of their part of the roof, and Todo's like, oh no, this is really bad, we should get out of here, right? And Hiruhiko's like, yeah, but that's why, as we see that he's drawing the sword a little bit more, as he just looks up at Samura and just thinks like, oh, if he wasn't anticipating that his daughter was here, he must be unsettled, to say the least, right? And he pretty much just says like, hey, if we're going to capture Samura's daughter, it's here, now, or never. As he pulls his sword and does the move of Banquet, right? As he sort of just like pulls out sword, and we don't really see too much happening, except a bunch of crow feathers falling down around Hiruhiko. And we see in the background, Toto's head has been cut off, and it falls to the ground with a thud sound effect as Hiruhiko looks back behind him, as we see that Samura has come through and also cuts off Hiruhiko's head. And like I said, this was like a, oh, what in the world? Samura really just didn't do that, right? And of course, Iori and Chihiro are looking in on this, and Iori's just like, what has my father just done? Like, I just watched him murder 2 people in front of me, right? As Chihiro just thinks like, hey, when he draws Tobimune, he uses these dancing feathers to sense all of his surroundings. One of Tobimune's powers is Crow. He can swap locations with any of the dancing feathers, which is honestly so scary. Like, I'm honestly sort of thinking like, hey, if you just like throw a lot of confetti off of a building, right, and it all drifts in its various ways, and then all of a sudden you can just say, oh yeah, I'm going to transport to that one, my sword in my hand, I'm going to slice this guy's head off. Yeah, Crow is an incredibly powerful ability to not only summon feathers, but then be able to transport to them. I really like that we are learning how the Tobimune actually works here in this sense, right? Well, Chihiro then just says like, all right, Koro, Shred, drawing his enchanted blade, right? As we see that Samura walks over to, of course, Kumeyuri, that Hiruhiko's body can no longer hold in this moment. I didn't mention it, but we also see that both Hiruhiko's hands have been cut off again, so hey, it sort of is what it is there. But of course, the Kumeyuri is laying on the ground, so Samura just goes over and says like, what on earth is going on? And he turns around to see where all of the Masumi are doing all of their various things. Like, of course, all of the other sorcerers who are just here in the building are still trying to like get Iori and capture it. Like, hey, the Shaku still promised some money, and if as long as they get her, I'm sure Yora and the other guys will still all pay in this sort of respect, right? But Samura just looks over and just is like, hey, bro, did you guys break the seal? And he's like, no, we didn't whatsoever, right? As we pretty much see that Rose is like, hey, your daughter did it all on her own, right? And Samura's like, well, then redo it, right? And Iori sort of suddenly like speaks up in this moment, just saying like, hey, do you not have anything to say to me after such a long time? All of this time, father, as we just see Chihiro looking over. But in this moment, Hiruhiko's head laying on the ground suddenly just says, oh, father. Right sort of says this as the head sort of disappears in this moment. But also, the Kumeyuri inside of Samura's hand also sort of just dissolves into nothing in this same moment, right? We see that Samura's very taken aback by this, and also, Roku is just like, what in the world's going on here? Or no, what is it, Moku, and Sumi? Yeah, Moku is like, what in the world is going on here? As all of a sudden, all of our main cast of characters, of course this is Chihiro, Iori, the Masumi, and Samura, all suddenly like get, oh, and also Ikora, we can't forget that Ikora's also here, suddenly get like this very weird wobbly sensation, right? As we see that Iori almost starts to lose balance in the moment, and I love how Ikora's also like, oh, the building, but of course, he's just already sitting on the ground, so it's like not much for him to pretty much do here, but besides be like, oh gosh, I'm just here, why is everything just shaking and moving all weird, right? As all of a sudden, Ro just thinks like, oh, hey, it's not the building, it's our inner state. As Samura just thinks like, oh, this is. And of course, we remember earlier that Hiruhiko used the move Banquet. As we get this, oh, it's such a cool panel where we see, of course, the 2 Geisha who were sort of, who came out whenever Hiruhiko just first used the enchanted blade right there in like that brief moment in chapter, what was that, 64 or something like that, whenever Hiruhiko first used it. So we see these 2 Geishas, and we see they have this bottle of this substance, and they're pulling it down into one of those traditional like sake cup dish things, right? And we pretty much understand through some narration, One of Kumeyuri's powers is Banquet. It causes intoxicating hallucinations, right? Which is like, okay, and of anything, I did not expect Kumeyuri to be like this intoxicating thing, but also I don't know if you translated it out, if that would make a bit more sense, all things considered, because of course, like, hey, I'm sure Koregumo was translated to Cloud Gouger, so he sort of knew what it was going for there, but we really haven't had any of our Chain of Blades translated since then. This was something I talked about a few episodes ago, so I'm not really going to go back and talk about it here, all things considered, right? But the whole idea is like, okay, it is an illusionary power. As Chihiro just thinks like, oh, damn it, we let Hiruhiko make the first move. Samura's cuts were merely just an illusion, right? And Rose like, hey, where did he actually go here in this moment? As Samura just thinks like, damn it, it even produced the sensation of slicing, of course, when he went through and cut off both Toto and Hiruhiko's heads. Hey, I am glad they are still alive, because that would have been a massive, like, hey, we're going to kill off two of the main villain members of this series already. Hope you enjoy it, right? But either way, Chihiro just thinks like, hey, Mr. Samura was just taken by surprise. His daughter's presence must have had distracted him here in this moment. Of course, really what Hiruhiko was going for earlier in the chapter. As we see that all of the other sorcerers are not affected by this whatsoever, as we see that Moku ends up like saying, oh man, all of these guys weren't affected, so Iori, Chihiro, nearly everybody else is having to deal with all of this as all of these other sorcerers are coming in and still trying to kidnap Iori, right? As Chihiro just leaps out of the area and just is like, hey, and he just thinks to himself like, hey, Mr. Samura, no excuses. He just says that loud, protect your daughter. Right, as we then see that he jumps out of the picture and that all of these various sorcerers are coming towards Iori. And Iori is just like completely shaken up by this. She is not good enough of a swords person, really. I mean, as she pointed out last time, she did practice it a little bit more after the fact whenever she was pretty much like shoved out by her father. In that way, sort of like be able to stand by his side. But still, with all of the Kumeyuri's effects going on around her, like she doesn't really know how to respond to all of this. But of course, Samura comes in and saves the day, right? As we eventually just see that Chihiro is getting ready to leave the area, and Moku's like, hey, what are you doing, Chihiro, right? As he just says like, hey, I'll get the sorcerer, right? As we see that Chihiro leaps off of the top of the building. At this point, we cut down to a lower floor of the Kyoto Bloodshed Hotel, where we see that's where both Hiruhiko and Toto actually are. As Hiruhiko's just like, oh, look at this, the Kumeyuri is really useful, isn't it, right? And Toto's just like, hey, look at all of your wounds right now. They're just so serious. And with the Kumeyuri's abilities, we can get away. You do not have to get risky here, right? But here he goes like, hey, let me get risky. If we miss this chance, there won't be another. We need to get Samura's daughter. And Toto just is like, hey, I don't care. Tell the truth, Hiruhiko. And Hiruhiko's just silent. She just says like, hey, there's no way your mind is thinking that far ahead. As really, Toto just puts it in like a little bit of a metaphor, just saying like, hey, it's almost just like a kid wanting to play just one more game in a video game, right? As Hiruhiko just is like, hey, is it really that obvious? And she's like, yes, it actually really is, right? As he just says like, all right then, no quitting, just one more time. As we then see a little bit of a goldfish come around in the area, as Hiruhiko just is like, hey, besides, he's already coming. As we see, get a little bit of narration from Chihiro's perspective, just saying like, hey, the first Kuro is used for detection. A beginner has a limited range using the Kumeyuri, so I'll just search inside of the hotel. As he just thinks like, hey, good thing I know Kumeyuri's abilities. That's why I use Nishiki to strengthen my inner ears. This time, I am prepared. As we just see Chihiro start to walk down the hall, and he finds both where Toto and Hiruhiko currently are. As he just walks down the corridor, as we see that Hiruhiko just is like, hey, don't worry, I'll go after the daughter. And this time, I'll win. As we see Chihiro almost vanish from the end of the hallway, and sort of like these sparks of the Nishiki like trail pretty much, and also all of the water droplets around him, as he runs forward, uses the Inten, and clashes swords with Hiruhiko. But of course, Hiruhiko has the Kumeyuri and holds it and blocks Chihiro right in this instant, right? As I think that Chihiro is probably using the EI White Purity style here in this moment, right? Well, either way, Hiruhiko just is like, hey, you better actually try and kill me this time, Chihiro. And he's just like, hey, last time I didn't know the Kumeyuri's whereabouts, and now that I found it, I have no issues killing you. As we cut up to one little scene on top of the Kyoto Bloodshed Hotel again on the roof, as we see that, of course, Samura just protected Iori in this moment from all of these various sorcerers, and we just see that Iori is sort of looking at her father, and of course Samura is reveling in all the lives he just had to cut short. As we then cut away to the final scene of the chapter, as we head back over to Tokyo, as we see that Yora and the Hatshaku are sort of just standing right around in the open of the streets of Tokyo, right? We see that there's currently the owl still going on in the sky, so it's currently the eternal night still, right? As we see that Yora just is like, alright, Seiichi Samura is the Hatshaku's most powerful weapon right now. We must yield him wisely, then sacrifice him for the greatest possible gain. He's like, yes, that is Seiichi Samura's fate. As Yoshi is like, hey, and one key to sealing that fate is his daughter. He just says like, hey, depending on how the battle in Kyoto is going, we will fire 2 arrows. As we see that Yora just points his hand straight underground. And I really like the wording here of like, hey, we'll fire 2 arrows, and then he points down to the ground. Of course, we see the Hatshaku flame symbol on his hand in this moment. As of course, he points down below, as he just says like, hey, deep down right below us lies the Shinuchi, right? Of course, we also see it like in the Kabunagi headquarters, all wrapped up and protected here in a moment, and like these massive torii gates with all the binding rope wrapped around it. And we see a few, from what we can presume to be Kabunagi members, looking down it from like a window glass high above. It really looks like one of those testing chambers or something. I don't really know what else to call it, right? But we see the Hatshaku just is like, hey, and Kabunagi headquarters is quite the obstacle. As all of a sudden, everybody starts talking around them as the sky begins to light up. As the Hatshaku just is like, oh dear, this is going to be rough. As we look up above everybody, and yes, the crow has been lifted, so this was the moment, of course, the 3 enchanted blades got drawn over to Kyoto Bloodshed Hotel. As we see that Yora just says, oh, it appears that it is time. As we see the Hatshaku kneel down on one knee, place his hand right above the ground, and we see some pine trees start to sprout up here in this moment. And that is where we end this chapter of Kagurabachi, chapter number 75, on like this little bit of a note of like, okay, what is the other arrow that Yura is trying to fire? And second off, it looks like they are actually going after Shinuchi. This can't be a good thing whatsoever. I feel like we are about to get some fodder in the opposite way of not Hishaku fodder, but Kabunagi fodder, so honestly, a really awesome chapter of Kagurabachi just going through it. I really love the beginning moment where it's just like, okay, hey, Samura's here. He uses his incredibly overpowered ability of Crow, comes through, and cuts down both Hiruhiko and Toto. And like, whenever I first read this chapter, I was like, wait, are both of them just dead? And then, of course, on the next panel, or on the next 2 pages, it's like, okay, no, it's actually the ability Banquet of the Kumeyuri, which is honestly a really cool thing. It's like, hey, all of these illusions and all this stuff, and it really makes me interested to see how Iruha used this blade. So, of course, it makes sense, like, okay, as we see, you can only directly target a few specific people. Like, I guess you could maybe target everybody, but it only really works if you don't target, or if you don't target your allies, but you target your enemies, pretty much. So, honestly, I find it a little interesting, too, that he just goes and says, hey, Akora, I'm going to be putting you under the Kumeyuri's whole trance thing also, when in reality, bro, you're not doing anything. You're just sitting here on the ground. You don't even know how to wield a sword, but still, it may be really cool if Ikora's just like, hey, after this whole battle, I'm going to learn how to wield a sword. I'm going to join Chihira's crew. Something I was saying, like, what was it, 6 chapters ago during chapter number 69 where Ikora comes in, but either way, a lot of really cool stuff. I love the visual that we get on page 9 where we see that Hiruhiko is pulling out the blade and just the image of the Banquet into 2 geishas. I will honestly probably put it in the thumbnail because it's such a cool image for that, but that's really cool. But really heading on here, what I think is going to happen next. It seems like Chihiro and Hiruhiko are going to be having another little bit of their fight. I either expect next chapter to be almost entirely with Yora going through the Kabunagi headquarters to retrieve the Shunichi and really ending off the chapter on that note of like, hey, things are getting even more dire. But I also really wonder what this other arrow is that, who's his face is talking about, that Yora is talking about. Honestly, I could really see it being like, hey, all of a sudden, of course, we know that, oh gosh, what's his name? Why can I not remember it right now? Kagurabachi, has one of the other Enchanted Blades that seems to be Subaru's Enchanted Blade. And who knows, it may be a thing where, like, hey, nobody's protecting Subaru in this moment, so he gets killed. So now there's another Enchanted Blade here that has to directly fight Samura, while Chihiro and Hiruhiko are tied up downstairs with, of course, Inten and Kumeyuri. That's just a little bit of an idea I have. I don't really know how good it's going to play out. But it's either going to be, hey, Yura is going through for all the Kabanagi stuff next time, or I think it's going to be sort of the big like, hey, we're going to talk out some of our feelings between both Samura and Iori, because, of course, on page number 16, we see this for a brief little second of, like, hey, Iori staring up at her father who is utterly blind, just like, damn it, I just killed, like, 15 people, and that's where we sort of end that little scene for the moment. Honestly, I really don't know how much more I have to say about this chapter. I had a theory I was wanting to talk about earlier going into this, but in the process of just talking about Kagurabachi for like 20 minutes, it totally just like went out one ear and didn't just like did a loop-de-loop. I talked about Kagurabachi and it just completely left me here in this moment, but either way, a really cool chapter. I like seeing more about Samura's abilities, seeing more about Hiruhiko's abilities, and really just the abilities of the Kumeyuri in general. I love seeing Chihiro just come through here to actually use Inten again, become the little fish boy that we all know he is. And eventually, yeah, just seeing all the illusion stuff going on. Just also nod, hey, Akura is here too. And really, that's all to the chapter. Just really interested to see what happens next time. And yeah, for all that out of the way, thank you guys so very much for watching this video on Kagurabachi chapter number 75. Again, this chapter was titled Illusion. Of course, hey, that's what the Kumeyuri does. But yeah, with all that out of the way, again, thank you guys so very much for watching. And I've done plenty of other Kagurabachi videos on the channel. I think I've done like, what, 30 of them now? Hey, I have my channel content stuff. I've got YouTube Studio pulled up already. Yes, this will be the 34th Kagurabachi chapter review I've done. So hey, if you're interested in any of the other Kagurabachi chapter reviews, if you want to look at any of the previous 33 chapters, they will all be up on the channel. There will be a playlist link down in the description box of this video, and also on the end card of the video that you are currently watching now. But yeah, with all that out of the way, here's something I don't normally do, but if you guys did enjoy this video, maybe you want to subscribe to get more good Kagurabachi chapter reviews in the future, because I plan to keep doing them. Granted, I'll keep doing them even if you guys don't subscribe, but hey, it'd be a little bit of a cool thing to be like, hey, number get bigger. That's pretty cool. But either way, thank you guys so very much for watching this video on Kagurabachi chapter number 75. Again, this chapter was titled Illusion, and I will catch you guys next time for chapter number 76 of Kagurabachi. Until then, I'll catch you guys next time. This will be Glowplasma 231, signing out. What can I say? The Kumeyuri Geishas just look so cool. Alright, Bachi Bros, I'll see you next time.